My Mayu out in Hawaii, and Ani, I forget where you are.
I'm in San Diego now.
San Diego.
I'm
Charles,
waiting for Lama Kathy to visit us
yeah,
on Zoom.
and
That's right.
Charles out in the desert, and Carolyn, I think she's back east somewhere. I don't remember if she wants to.
I live in Utah, Moab, Utah.
Okay, great. Welcome.
I'm part of the Crestone Sangha.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, welcome everyone, and we're going to request that Lama Kathy turn the wheel of Dharma tonight using the root text of Mingyur Rinpoche, Joyful Wisdom.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, and so we're going through this book and we're taking plenty of time so that we can have any questions or application in our daily life address. So in that regard, we have no goal as to when we finish the book.
Thank goodness for that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. Well, we're more than halfway done with the book now, so that's kind of good. And I really appreciate your patience as we've gone through the book over a period of time. Mingyur Rinpoche tells a lot of really lovely illustrative stories, and it's a lot of fun to hear his own personal take on the practices of meditation that are taught in the book. So I thank you very much for that introduction, and I'll just say thanks to all of the members and friends in Santa Monica KTC for continuing to practice together and take care of one another, and to make these practice and teaching opportunities available to members of the Sangha there. So just like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's nice also to say hi to my friends in other parts of California and Utah and Hawaii, the mountain states. I was driving through Columbus, Ohio, and remarking about how it continues to look like a set of blocks, children's blocks, set on a table, because it's flat as a board. Columbus, Ohio is flat as a board. The foothills of the Alleghenies don't start until you go about 40 miles, 20 to 40 miles east. So then it starts to roll a bit. But in any case, I thank you so much for your time and for being here together. And I'm really happy to join you after you've done some sitting meditations. So that's kind of nice. In the chapter that we're looking at right now, this for those of you who have the hardback book, it is chapter, well, actually, it's both the same in hardback and paperback. It's chapter 7 on attention. And he opens the chapter by talking about our attention being like a little bird that flits from branch to branch. And so he then goes into discussing the meaning of the Tibetan word shine, which is the Tibetan word for quiet sitting meditation, which is known as shamatha in Sanskrit. Whether you use Sanskrit or whether you use Tibetan, the word means calm, abiding. And so he talks about the practice as being a way of evening out and smoothing out our experience in the world. And he says most of us, when we look at something, hear something, or watch a thought or emotion, we have some sort of judgment about the experience. And I've noticed this too. We have, as human beings, we have these amazing brains that can discriminate between delicious food and food that is bad for you. And we can spot a poisonous insect or a beneficial insect at many paces. We have this great, amazing ability to survive by being perceptive. And so, but we don't know when to turn it off. And as a result, we attend to or pay attention to everything and try to give everything an equal dose of our attention. And so this is why many of us feel tossed and thrown about by our mental processes, our likes and dislikes. Because as human beings, we have a great discrimination sense and judgment sense, but we don't know when to turn it off, and we often end up judging ourselves in a negative way and others in a negative way. And so the practice of shamatha or shine involves letting go of all of these judgments and opinions and beginning to just pay attention to what we see from whichever of the branches of this imaginary tree that we are on. So he said this practice has profound implications for the way we approach difficult emotions and the various problems we encounter in daily life. And then he said, in most cases, our experiences are conditioned by the branch we are sitting on and the screen of branches in these trees before us. So basically what he's saying, our environment. He's continuing the use of the analogy of the bird in the trees. But the fact of the matter is, our judgments are often clouded by our environment and our habitual patterns and emotions. And then he says, this simple awareness, we are, let's see, but if we just look at our experience of the world directly, we could see every aspect of our experience as it is, and our opinions and judgments as opinions and judgments, not all mixed up together, but as distinct aspects of our experience. And then he said, in that moment of pausing, just to be aware of where we are and what we are experiencing, that just basic awareness. He says this opens us not only to the possibility of bypassing habitual judgments and ideas, but also to responding freshly to every experience as it occurs. Because we often respond to things in a way that we feel obligated to. Like, I will always respond to this word in this way, or I will always respond to this person in this way, and I will always respond. And anyway, it's however we fall into these habits of reaction, we have to find a way to change our patterns of reactiveness so that we're not immediately jumping to a judgment. I've run into people in my life who are instant judges of everything. And oddly, I've met a few people who respond to virtually everything that they experience with some kind of negative response, like, ooh, I don't like that. Or, ooh, that's not going to work. And so forth. They immediately jump to the negative. And I say to myself, wow, that must be really hard. That must be a hard person to be around long term. And so what we're hoping for in the practice of meditation is to calm down the reactiveness and the judgments. And so he said, Mingyur Rinpoche says there are many ways to approach shamatha or shine practice. And he said, many of the people I have met over the years have asked for a step-by-step guide. What should I do first? What should I do next? And then he says, in the following pages, I will attempt to describe a step-by-step approach to each of the basic practices. And that's where we're going to start. Those of you who have the hardback book, we're going to start on page 146, but it's the part that's labeled step 1. Step 1. Objectless attention. And so he's saying the most basic approach to attention is referred to as being objectless, not focusing on any particular scene or aspect of experience, but just looking and marveling at the wide range of scenery, he says, as it comes and goes. And then he describes a trip to Rio de Janeiro. And he said, I would often exercise by walking or hiking up a tall hill that was covered in a jungle-like forest of plants and trees, bearing various types of fruit. He said, halfway up the hill, I would get tired, overwhelmed by the humidity, the altitude, and the sheer variety of foliage. But at certain places, there would be a wooden chair or a bench, and I would sit in the chair and just rest, simply aware of my physical fatigue and my surroundings. And so he said, you don't have to hike through the hills of Rio to accomplish this sense of open relaxation and awareness. He said, you can also experience it after washing a big pile of dishes. When you finish washing the dishes, you can sit down in a chair with a big sigh. Your body may be tired, but your mind is at peace, totally open, totally at rest, and immersed in the present moment of Maybe, he says, your children are making noise in another room, or maybe you're watching television with all the changes and scenes and the commercial interruptions. But neither of those disturbs your sense of a relaxation. He says, thoughts, feelings, and sensations may come and go, but you just observe them. You pay light and gentle, or what we in the Buddhist tradition refer to as bare attention to them, as you rest with an awe, simply open to the present moment. The past, which whether you're washing dishes or hiking, is over, and the future, it has not yet come. Right here, right now, is the only present moment. And he said, this is how to rest the mind in objectless intention, as though you've just finished a large, long, or difficult task. Just let go and relax. He says, you don't have to block any thoughts, emotions, or sensations that arise, but neither do you have to chase them. Rest in the present moment of awe. If the thoughts, emotions, or sensations arise, simply allow yourself to be aware of them. So this is different than the shamatha techniques we may have learned elsewhere. In this attention, he says, objectless attention doesn't mean just letting your mind wander aimlessly among fantasies, memories, or daydreams. You may not be fixating on anything in particular, but you are still aware. A friend of mine today was talking about this, and she described it as being similar to the experience of watching fish swim in an aquarium. You just allow yourself to experience the movement of everything that is happening, but you don't attend to or tell yourself a story about anything that's happening. You just allow yourself to be aware of the present moment of mind's natural awareness. So he says, he talked about being in the Denver airport and watching people go by on the shuttle. And he said, I didn't ask myself, where is it coming from? How long will it take to go where they're going? It's not like that. He said, when we practice on the level of objectless attention, we're actually resting the mind in its natural clarity, unaltered by the passage of thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. This natural clarity is always present for us in the same way that space is always present. Sense, objectless attention is like allowing our in the trees. It's like allowing ourselves to be aware of the branches and leaves in front of us while recognizing the space that allows us to see the branches and leaves in the first place. He says thoughts, emotions, and sensations shift and quiver in awareness in the same way branches and leaves shift and quiver in space. Moreover, just as this space is not defined by the objects that move through it, awareness isn't defined or limited by thoughts, emotions, and sensations it apprehends. awareness simply is. So he says objectless attention involves settling into this isness, simply watching thoughts, emotions, appearances, and so on as they emerge against or within the background of space. Some people find the practice as easy as sitting in the chair after a busy day. Others find it rather difficult. I did. He said, whenever my father or other teachers tried to explain objectless attention, I was mystified and a little bit resentful. I couldn't understand how it was possible to simply watch whatever is going on as if it were a movie, or as many Buddhist texts say, the reflection of the moon in a puddle of water. In the moments of great anxiety, my thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations didn't seem like reflections. They seemed terribly solidly real. And so that's a little bit about the objectless attention. So Charles, you were saying that you were interested in the term. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I've always been a little mystified by that concept. I've heard it possibly in different terms. One is choiceless awareness. And I don't know if it's referring to the same thing. But I found as you were speaking, just actually, I wish I'd heard this long ago. I kind of I'd heard decades ago about choiceless awareness, and I kind of gave up on it because I didn't know of any Kagyu teacher that ever talked about it. And so now hearing this, it brings back those memories, but the joy of just, you touched on so many feelings that I have at the time when I get home from work or when I finish an activity and I just sit down and just let things be. And it seems so natural and so fulfilling, but it was never part of the practice because it wasn't the shamatha techniques that we've been taught. So personally, I'm thrilled to hear this because I feel like it's been a lifelong experience, but I've never been able to identify it. And so I don't know if that helps, but I find everything that he said and you said just now extremely fulfilling. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it because, I can understand, I really appreciate what you've said about it. And I can also relate to what Mingyur Rinpoche is saying that he felt when he first learned of this. When he first was taught this, where he said he felt a little confused and a little resentful because it just seemed that how could that possibly be meditation? How could that possibly be? And I think it's because we do need, for many of us, we do need a tether to our attention. We need to be tethered to an object of attention. And in fact, after this instruction, Mingyur Rinpoche gives a series of brief instructions of what to do after you have rested in this objectless attention or objectless awareness. Because, and I may have mentioned this last time, I believe I did. Did I read you selections from the ninth Karmapa's pointing out the Dharmakaya last time?
I don't think so.
Okay, I have frequently in recent years been sharing little snippets of this teaching, and the reason I'm sharing little snippets of this teaching is because Khenpo Rinpoche didn't want me to share this teaching with people who had not yet done the Karma Kaju Nundro. But what's so interesting is that his take on these same things that Mingyur Rinpoche is talking about here, they're very clear in a completely different way. Mingyur Rinpoche uses examples like the birds sitting in a tree and just experiencing everything without commenting on it. And I think that that is a really good example. And then Khenpo Rinpoche, he explains the same thing. I think that both Mingyur Rinpoche and Khenpo Rinpoche are following the ninth Karmapa's basic outline. They're both following the basic outline that starts with objectless attention. And then Rinpoche, what's really interesting is Khenpo Rinpoche says, he describes his version of objectless attention. And then after that, he says, if you can allow your mind to rest in that way, then the additional techniques of shamatha taught at this point are unnecessary. He said, however, he said, since it often happens that we cannot simply rest our minds in ordinary cognition, a variety of methods involving directed mental focus are presented next. So what's great about this, because Mingyur Rinpoche does this as well in his book, is it starts with this very subtle technique of, Khenpo Rinpoche explains it in terms of not prolonging the past, not inviting the future, not analyzing the present, but instead resting in the present moment of mind's natural awareness. And Mingyur Rinpoche explains this awareness is that he said you're aware of what you see, you're aware of what you hear, but you can also be aware of awareness itself. And so there are many different ways, many different cues and prompts for this type of attention. But what's very interesting is that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said at certain points, he said, this is not easy. This is not something that's a snap for people. And he said, this is why the other methods are provided. He says, you start with a little bit of this objectless rest. And then he said, if that begins to lead to your being fatigued, he says, then what will happen? You'll know when you're getting fatigued, when you have a lot of thoughts arising that then begin to trouble you or distract you, or that you begin to sort of, fixate on specific aspects of your experience, like, oh, this is hurting, or oh, this feels uncomfortable, or this can't be right, this can't be meditation, And then he says that's a good time to set that method aside and then go to the next one. And a more traditional, see if other people were familiar with this method, and if other people were familiar with the method, and if they had tried it, and if they had any response or questions.
Lama Kathy, I think we didn't hear the part where you said set aside the method and then go to, and I think then
go to the next method. Yeah, I'm in a rural area, so every now and then the Wi-Fi gets a little squirrely. So I'm sorry.
Good.
Lama Kathy, I have a question.
Yes.
Is objectless meditation the same as open awareness?
I'm going to say it sounds pretty much like it, but I would defer to the folks who have attended the programs, because I have not.
What was the term you used, Daniel?
Open awareness.
Sounds the same to me, but the technique sounds to be exactly the same. But maybe people who've attended Mingyur Rinpoche's programs might have some comment about that.
I took 2 of his online courses. I can't remember the titles now. The I walked away with the notion of don't follow the thought that comes up. Don't push away the thought that comes up, and rest. Rest in awareness. Easier said than done, I have to admit.
Yeah.
Basically, I think, I mean, of course, the course was over several weeks, and it's more detailed than I'm saying. But I think the bottom line was what he's describing here. Don't pay attention to this, to that, to the other thing, and at the same time, don't try not to pay attention.
Right.
Because not paying attention forms attention as well, and so I did give up a few times.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you know, what can I say, right? It's a very difficult thing, and because it's so subtle. And
Yes.
most of us have actually done this in one way or another. I think of just allowing I think using the example of my Dharma friend early today, who said, it's like, she said, I just observe my thoughts passing by. She said, very much like just watching the fish swim in an aquarium. It doesn't really matter. There's no drama going on there as far as I'm concerned. You know, I have no real interest in the fish, you know, but, you know, so it's like you watch it as a disinterested third party. And so, but that, as you say, is not the way we are used to doing everything, because we've been trained all of our lives to be very purposeful about everything, and to ascribe meaning to things, because it's how we've lived our lives and navigated our relationships and our work. And it's not been that, you know, we haven't been rewarded for just being observant of our awareness.
But by the end of the 6 or 7 weeks, I can't remember now how long this said, the joy of living, I think I took the first couple of things. For a few split seconds during the meditations, there would be spaces where there was nothing. Just, I mean, like, it was very fleeting. And then you had to watch yourself. I had to watch myself not to try to catch it, not to repeat it, not to say, oh, what was that? What happened? You know, where did it go? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
But the experience was there, and I guess you can't deny the experience.
Right.
But a split second. So something about this awareness, objectless awareness, after a while, it seems to produce a blank, kind of nothing. There's nothing there, a split second of absolutely nothing. I can't put it in any other way.
Everyone has a different response to this, I think. And I think the wording we use for it is going to be individual to each of us, yes? And other people have described this to me as being present. Being present, the word they said is like of minds, you know, being aware of the mind's basic awareness, you know, being present with it. And other people have described it as this sort of empty space. But other people have said that it's actually, it's not a trance, and it's not dullness, and that everything is appearing, and it's appearing vividly, but it's unconceptualized. We're not saying, like, I'm looking at, even though I have this lovely background, I'm actually looking at a chair right now. And so there's the chair does not disappear. I am looking at the entire corner of this room, and there's so many things here. but I can be with them without commenting. And I think that's the interesting part. Without saying, oh, this is that, and this is that, and labeling. I'll never forget, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was talking about this one time, and he said, we experience addictive conceptuality. And I think this is really interesting. And as one of his translators said to me, our problem as human beings is that we think that thinking is important. We think that thinking is important. And because we think that thinking is important, then we can't stop. We become addicted to this conceptualization of everything. Whereas what he's advocating here in objectless attention is something different than that. And that's why I find it very difficult to do sometimes, because I'm so used to, I made a living conceptualizing. You know, I made a living as a writer where you conceptualize everything. And so just to switch that off seems very unnatural. But yet everyone does experience that feeling of like sitting in your easy chair at the end of a busy day, just being present, or being present at the side of the ocean, watching the waves come in, no comment, just there. You know, you're just present with the sound and the feel and the feel of the air. And there's no story, you know, it's really interesting. So I think that those who live in the mountains, you know, that would be interesting. Yes, Maya.
I just had a quick question. So then if you have non-objective attention, is that then the same as awareness, or is attention and awareness totally different?
That's a really good question. We are attending to things, objectless attention. I'm going to say it's very similar, if not exactly the same. This was something that Daniel just asked, as a matter of fact. He said, is this practice the same as open awareness? And I'm going to say it sounds really similar, but maybe it's not. We'll have to read on in the book to see.
Can I just the reason I asked too, because I just got a message from my cousin's oldest daughter, and she's doing a podcast now, but she was giving this memory of a time when she wanted to speak with her dad. Her dad, which was my cousin, has passed away now, but she wanted to talk to him about something that was difficult for her. And so she went to him, and he said to her, "It's okay, Kath, I already know." And she said, well, how do you know? And he said, because when you love someone, you pay attention. And so that's not the same as objective, but in a sense, it's kind of like just resting and like observing, and then, you know what I'm saying? And so then I thought, oh, because I know also just recently I've had a lot of phone calls to make, and some of them with these different companies and problems. It's just been very, very upsetting. And then I found myself like, how am I going to deal with this upset? And so I was doing just what you were talking with the other lady about, where I just took some time afterwards to just rest and not think about it, and try to just go to not going into that thing where you're not judging and you're not, you know. And then once the mind was quiet, I didn't always have the answers, but I felt like, you know, I could just kind of get through it in a calmer way by just not focusing on the upset.
You know,
and I know too, like a lot of times when if I have things that I haven't been able to figure out, a lot of times for me, if I when I'm taking a shower and just the water's running and it's quiet, and suddenly then answers will come because you're not looking for them maybe. And I don't know if that's non-objective awareness or attention either, or if that's that moment where you talk about a pause.
I can't say with certainty because I'm not, I would say that I am not an expert meditator and I'm not an expert meditation teacher. So that's where I would go to start with, because I'm kind of learning right along with all of you as I read this book.
Yeah.
But based on my experience with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teachings, he's talked many times about this bare awareness, where you're just not commenting on what's going on and you're just present with everything. And I think that your experience of having taking this mental break after having difficult conversations, I think it's a really smart thing to do, because otherwise all we do is try to use thinking because we think that thinking is important. We just try to figure it all out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when instead things might be better served, we might be better served by just allowing everything to be. And then at the end of that, then we're in a different place than we were when we started. In the Lojong practice of mind training, what we would do is if something is upsetting, we would immediately take our attention to it. We would put our attention on it and say, this thing that is happening is causing me sadness or pain. And I take on mentally the sadness and pain of all beings in this sadness and pain that I'm feeling now. And this is another way of, I guess you could say, I don't want to use this word because it's kind of a loaded word, but I'm trying to find another way around it to say it's like depersonalizing it, but it's universalizing. It's more that we're universalizing the experience of being human, right?
Okay.
And so by taking on the suffering of other beings, we're no longer focused on me, I, and that sometimes takes away some of the negativity that's felt by these things. So it's a little bit like that.
Thank you for reminding me of that. That's a good practice to remember. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
I have before, but I've forgotten lately with the the numbers of these kinds of things that keep happening.
Yeah. Well, what's so really interesting is that Trungpa Rinpoche, he said this once. He said that the practice of Lojong is like it's connected to the practice of Mahamudra. And the previous Kala Rinpoche, in one of his books, also said the same thing. And I think it's because there are two types of bodhicitta. There's ultimate bodhicitta, which is this understanding of emptiness and this understanding of awareness and emptiness. And then there's the relative bodhicitta, which is love and compassion, and they actually serve and help each other. The emptiness informs the love, and the love informs the emptiness, and they both can serve as remedies for emotional states that we find particularly difficult. And both of them allow us to be with something without being sort of knocked over by it, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing about that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well,
you said it's to understand that Lojong's connection with Mahamudra is like understand awareness and emptiness. Was that it? Awareness and emptiness?
I'd have to look it up to get the exact wording, but they inform one another.
Inform one another. Okay.
Yeah.
I get
because when you develop an understanding of emptiness and an understanding of this emptiness and awareness, the unity of emptiness and awareness, the fact that, you know, you can be aware, but there's no entity experiencing all of this, you know, there's just empty awareness. And that's one way to work with the things that are going on in your mind. But that's really not easy for us. It's new to us. But on the other hand, relative bodhicitta, where we use love and compassion to disarm our reactivity and to connect us with our own feelings and the feelings of all beings, that's another way of working with it. Trungpa Rinpoche, in one of his books, his commentary on creation and completion, he gives like a 3-part method for working with mental afflictions. And the first one is to work with it and see the basic empty nature of the mind that's having these thoughts and feelings, like where, you know, what's the color of this mind? What's the shape? Where does it start? Where does it end? There are several ways to approach this. One is analytical, which is this looking for the color, shape, and location. But the other method is simply to rest in awareness, which is what Mingyur Rinpoche is talking about. So this is 2 methods to understand the same thing. And Trungpa Rinpoche said, well, it's great if you can do that. But if you can't do that, then the second technique you should try is working with the mind, working with the love and compassion aspect of relative bodhicitta by taking on the sufferings of beings in the suffering that you're experiencing. And he said sometimes that will help to release and resolve the situation. And then he said, if none of that is working, he said, there's the third technique. And he said, and that is, he said, where you remind yourself that allowing yourself to follow thoughts and emotions and kind of spin out with them is not helpful. And he said, and you have to, at that point, just turn away and abstain from pursuing the negative mental affliction. Like let's say I'm really angry about something and I want to give somebody a piece of my mind about it. And I've tried to look at the emptiness of the being and the mind that's having that thought, and that didn't work. And maybe I tried the love and compassion approach, and that didn't work. But I need to do something with this. So he said, sometimes it's better just to turn around and walk away, and then abstain from acting out the negativity that you feel. I don't know what Mr. Rogers would say about that, but I think, what do you do with the mad that you feel? That one came up for me today. But anyway, we should make this a little bit more participatory. I'm sorry, we've been having this little discussion. Do other folks have responses or thoughts? If not, I can move on to the form meditation. Responses, thoughts?
I think move on. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So let's take a look here. His second technique is called attending. See, here's attending. You attend to something. I just love it. As a consequence of being embodied beings, he said, much of our experience is filtered through one or another of the 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But since the 5 sense faculties, or sense consciousnesses, as most Buddhist texts refer to them, can only register sensory perceptions, Buddhist science describes a 6th consciousness known as the mental consciousness. This 6th consciousness should not be confused with ESP, or an ability to see into the future, or any other mysterious capability. It's more akin to what neuroscientists describe as the capacity to organize the information received through the senses and form a concept or mental image. He said, mental consciousness is like the restless bird that's described earlier, flying from branch to branch, taking in the view. It tries to make sense of the information it receives and is impelled to respond, but it's possible to teach the bird to settle for a while by deliberately focusing its attention on one or another of the senses. And so he says, how is this done? In the course of ordinary experiences, the mind already tends to fixate on sensory information. However, the information we receive through our senses is more often than not a source of distraction. Inasmuch as we're embodied beings, we could have inevitably experienced a sense of futility if we attempted to disengage completely from our senses or block the information we receive through them. The more practical approach is to make friends with the information and utilize it as a means of calming the mind. And so, as I was taught, this friendship that he describes is most easily established by focusing on the visual objects of aspects of an object. For example, a rose, a flower. What we tend to think or feel about it doesn't matter. We don't call it good rose, bad rose, or I don't know rose. We simply just look at it as it is. If we do that, we can begin to separate our opinions from the simple experience of seeing. Our opinions aren't in themselves good or bad or confused, but when we collapse them together with an object, our minds become distracted. We start to wonder, is it a good rose or is it a bad rose? When was the last time I saw a rose? And so forth. The restless bird flies from branch to scene. And so the technical term for this is called form meditation. And he said, actually, form meditation is quite simple. We practice it unconsciously throughout the day. Whenever we look at something, like a television screen, the big pile of dirty dishes, or a person ahead of us in the grocery store. Form meditation simply involves raising this unconscious process to the level of active awareness. So he says, so how do you practice this method of meditation? He said, first, depending on your circumstance, assume whatever physical posture is most convenient or comfortable. But then he says, next, allow your mind to rest for a moment in this objectless attention. Just observe all the thoughts, sensations, and so on that come up. Then choose something to look at. The color of someone's hair, or the shape of their haircut, or a rose, or a peach, or your desktop. And just rest your attention on it, noticing its shape and color. You don't have to stare, and if you need to blink, just blink. Then he said, after a few moments looking at something or someone or something, then let your mind simply relax again in objectless attention. Then return your focus to the object for a few moments, then allow your mind to rest once more. Whenever I practice using a visual object as a support for resting the mind, I am reminded of one of the earliest lessons I learned from my father. There is to be a great benefit to be gained from alternating between object-based attention and a sort of objectless attention described earlier. When you rest your mind on an object, you're seeing it as something distinct and separate from yourself. But when we let go and simply rest our minds and bear attention, gradually we begin to realize that whatever we see and however we see it is an image made of thoughts, memories, and limitations conditioned by our sensory perception. In other words, there's no difference between what is seen and the mind that sees it. So I remember in Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, when he describes this, he says you pick something simple to start with, like a round river stone. He said you place this round river stone, he said, which could be kind of unremarkable and about 2 inches, there we go, yeah, about 2 inches or less in length. And you place it on the table in front of you, and you do the exact same thing that Mingyur Rinpoche talked about. He's having you look at an entire scene and just attend to the entire scene. but you can also attend to one part of it. Now, he's saying you can attend to just the shape of someone's hairstyle or the color of their hair. So it's not exactly the same as attending to a single round river stone, but it can be quite similar, where you're not blocking out anything, but you're just attending to this one object, the color of the hair, or this, the shape of my chair over here that I've been looking at. Just being attentive to that and allowing your mind to rest on that, your attention to rest on that. And after you've attended to it for a while, you remove your attention from it. And I was confused about how this was done. But then His Eminence Taisi Rinpoche did an exercise with us. And again, it was with a very small thing. He said, there is a flower here on my desk. He said, I want you all to look at this flower and look at it from where you are sitting and attend to it. Just be with that rose, that flower. It was a rose, by the way. And just look at it, look at it, look at it. And then he said, without taking your eyes away from it, stop looking at it. And you can see that shift, right? And so that really helped me to understand this process. Rather than trying to shift from this attention to something we call objectless attention. I mean, rather than trying to shift techniques, he merely said, without taking your, Taisi Rinpoche said, without taking your eyes away, stop looking at it. And there's a diffuseness that happens in that moment. And the diffuseness can be very, it can be a bit of a relief after all that attention. And so that helped me a lot with attending to form. So I wanted to make sure I said something about it, because I know we're coming to the end of our time. But what we can do is, I would try this if I were you, but you don't try it for like an hour or something. You try it for just a short period of time, right? And my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, said, always leave your meditation on good terms. Don't do it until you feel frustrated. Do it as long as this attention naturally it lasts. I don't know if this is helpful or not. Has someone who hasn't, is there anyone who hasn't shared this evening who has a thought or a question? Or something you want to share about this, or a question about the technique? Okay.
Lama
Well,
Kathy,
yes.
do we have a minute?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can describe this very well, but I've in experience of short sitting meditation, which I do maybe feel like I have quick moments of an objectless attention, but simultaneously, it's also a feeling of uncertainty, because I don't know how to put this, but I think without going too far back, but I think teachers always used to say to me, this is like school teachers, oh, you're like a daydreamer. So I think I have in the back of my head, like, oh, maybe I'm just daydreaming, but I'm actually not thinking about something specific in the moment. It sort of feels like I'm not sure if it's the right thing, if that makes sense. I'm not. It's a feeling of sort of openness is maybe the correct thing, but I can't describe it very well. And I'm not sure. Am I just also maybe drifting somewhere without realizing it, but I'm doing like a sort of objectless drifting. I don't know. it feels aware, but I'm basically what I'm trying to say is like I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing or if that's the right point. And it doesn't last very long either, by the way. Just does it make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying because is it a situation of actual, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Is it as just a situation of nothing happening, or is it resting in awareness? And I know that Khenpo Rinpoche has addressed this in one of his teachings, but it's not coming back to my mind. And what I would have to do is I would have, oh, here we go. Boy, that was easy. Okay. He said, well, Khenpo Rinpoche, said basically, he says the first experience of tranquility is that the mind is moving like the flow of a waterfall, which is to say it's uninterrupted and somewhat noisy speed of thought. Then he said, then eventually, if you continue to practice, you eventually, the mind will slow down and come to the second state of tranquility, which is like the slow current of a slow river. Sometimes be faster, sometimes slow. And then he said, again, if you continue, your mind will become like an ocean that's unmoved by the wind. And he talks about I'm just trying to find it here, but I thought I had it, but I don't. And the difference between just nothing going on in the mind and this awareness. And I think that what differentiates it is clarity as a clarity or how do I want to put this? There's like a clarity aspect of mind where you see things very clearly, but there's no fixation on them as being something, or you're not like, so if there is a dullness, like you're going to fall asleep, then that's a problem. If your experience of nothing happening in your mind is that you're not quite aware of something, there's no awareness basically. And so, but otherwise, I think it sounds okay. And the other thing is we have to emphasize process, not product. You're not trying to do something. You're just being with the mind as it is, and not trying to make it do something or make it experience something. I don't know if that's helpful.
It is, because I mean, I think, like, again, like I don't want to sound like, oh, I have this experience, and I don't feel like that either, but it still for a moment, like you say, like it has a certain openness. And like, I think it describes very well what you said before, that you're aware of things around you, but not specifically one thing at the time, I guess. So that's, like I said, my uncertainty comes more from, I know when, because I definitely have dullness and sleepiness all the time. So I know for sure when this is kicking in. But again, like because I don't feel like I'm experienced enough to know what it is, what is there. I wonder if that's what it is, that it's something you can't maybe describe necessarily exactly in words. I'm just wondering if it's the right experience, I guess. That's the question I have. Or if I'm going somewhere where I'm not, like, again, like I'm not trying to get this experience all the time, I'm trying to go there, but it just happens sometimes. But then I'm not sure if it's even a worthy experience or not.
Well, that's right. And I think it's it's fine actually. I think it's fine actually, because what Rinpoche is saying here, he says that he said the way you use your mind when meditating like this is basically the kind of attentiveness you have when you're threading a needle. You are relaxed, but you don't allow yourself to be distracted. Otherwise, you can't get the thread through the eye of the needle. You can also keep your body and mind still, like the surface of a calm ocean. Yet it's also without any kind of effort or restriction, like a bird flying through space. And so on. And so he says, let's see. Yeah, he just basically says, you can, if you can, let's see. He says your mind cannot be too tight or too loose. If your mind is too tight, that tension itself will make your mind agitated and distracted. On the other hand, if you're too loose, there won't be the necessary faculty of mindfulness. You will become distracted and be unable to apprehend or recognize that you have become distracted. See, and that's the thing. So rest your mind simply and directly without introducing tension or the laxity that allows for distraction. So that's a tough one, But I think it's based on everything that I've heard, it sounds like as long as you're experiencing, there was another piece that I was looking for and I couldn't find it, about stagnant shamatha, which he said is identified by a dull feeling. So I think it's okay. It sounds like it's all right, because he said you shouldn't really have a lot of evaluative, like, oh, this is great, this is meditation, or oh, this is terrible, this is not good. He said you shouldn't invest a lot of hope and fear in what you're doing. So let's see what we can find out for you. So if you want to write this out, we can run it past one of the lamas at KTD and see what they say. So we could do that. That would be fun. Well, I'm sorry that I couldn't give you a definitive answer, but Rinpoche always told me that the difference between nothing going on in your mind and a state of meditation is that quality of clarity and awareness. And if you don't have that, then then it means it is a state of dullness, and you need to brighten it up a bit. And and the main way of doing that is, he describes it in Dharma paths, is taking a few moments to just imagine that your breath is coming out and going into the sky and coming back as bright light. It goes into a shaft of light in the sky, and then the breath comes down and illuminates your body. And he said you do that for 1 minute, 2 minutes, or whatever, and it helps to brighten things up a little bit for your attention. So, but otherwise, I'd say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just let the mind be and try not to judge. That would be my, my initial take on it. But write it all out and we'll see.
Okay, I'll try.
Yes.
It's hard to describe, but yes.
Okay.
It's very short. It's definitely not like I'm not like, oh yes, for hours I'm floating around somehow.
No. It's not like, yeah, I know, right? Exactly. Yeah. Ani.
Very quick question. What is the book that you are reading from?
This one is it's called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya. And I'm not sure it's available. That's the problem. It may or may not be available. You can check at the KTD bookstore. The Trungpa Rinpoche has 2 books under this title, but neither one of them are complete. It's really interesting. He doesn't teach the entire book. In neither one of his books on Pointing Out the Dharmakaya does he teach the entire book, but Khenpo Rinpoche teaches the entire book in his, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, but it's not a paperback book you can buy in a bookstore. It's one of the transcripts of a 10-day teaching. But you can always check and see if it's available. Ah, good. Daniel's put the link to it in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You might need permission to get it. I don't know, but you can check. If nothing else, it's a really nice book. You know, even if it's not a book that you can get right now, it's something that hopefully you'll be able to get your hands on in the future. Because he walks you through these exercises. But I think Mingyur Rinpoche's exercises are much easier to follow. These are a little bit more challenging. So
thank you.
I think it really comes down to what's going to help our minds the most, you know, which approach, you know, appeals to us the most. And so I'll have to talk to Lama Karma, because Lama Karma Drodol was in Columbus last weekend. And too bad I hadn't had this class before that. Then I could have asked him. But I'll see if I can ask him some more about that and see what he thinks about it. Because he's got some good skill also in teaching meditation. So we'll see. Well, thank you so much. You guys have been incredibly patient tonight. It's been really great spending some time with you and talking about meditation. So next time we get together, we'll be talking about the next step, which is attending to sound. So he's been talking about attending to form, and next we're going to talk about attending to sound. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, in his book, he says, you know, he said you can just hear whatever is going on without being too picky about identifying it. Oh, that's a this or that's a that. It's not like bird watching, you know, where you have to figure out what it is. You just are present with it, with the sound. So we'll talk about that next time. So thanks, everyone. It's wonderful to chat with you. And I hope your practice continues and it goes well. And we can dedicate the merit of our session tonight to all sentient beings. So here's the short prayer. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Thank
Take
you.
good care.
Thank
Happy
you, everyone.
practicing.
Yeah.
Om